We'd like to thank Montecito Bank Trust for their generous support in making Scam Squad possible. I'm Patty Teal.
And I'm Deputy District Attorney Vicki Johnson. Scam Squad is up next.
Sound off.
1, 2.
Sound off.
3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Scam Squad.
Welcome to Scam Squad. I'm Patty Teal, and this week Deputy District Attorney Vicki Johnson is on a well-deserved vacation, but we have a great guest with us here today, Doris Roof from Montecito Bank Trust, to tell us what she's seeing as scams as far as the bank goes. Hi, Doris. Thank you so much for being here.
Hi, thank you, as always, for inviting me. Always like to talk about fraud and how to prevent it.
Sounds good.
Yeah. So one of the items that our processor has actually, and the processor is the person that handles the financial institution's work as far as putting transactions through and getting totals, etc. So they do a lot for a bank. So they alerted us to a scam that has been going on actually for quite a while now, but it's on the increase recently. And it is where the scammer, and usually what will happen is there are two people working hand in hand with this type of scam. And we may have brought this up before, but they work in together. The scammers do, and they will go ahead and call in pretending to be the card holder for their debit card. And I'm sure we'll start seeing it on the credit card side too, at our bank. But they will go ahead, pretend to be the card holder, and they go ahead and ask for address changes. They ask for increased limits on their card. Usually higher limits because they're stating they want to make a purchase, a special purchase of some kind, etc. So can you increase it to, let's say, $10,000? Or they'll say, hey, I'm going to be traveling. I'm in this area during this time period for the next 2 days or 3 days. So, and generally, the customer is identified. The scammers know a lot of the information so that they've purchased. And so they'll go ahead and answer a lot of the questions. Banks nowadays have that one-time passcode that is sent to the card holder to verify. And what they'll do is that scammer is also calling the actual card holder at the same time as the other person perpetrating to be the card holder when they're calling the financial bank, the financial institution. But they're also calling the actual card holder and saying, hi, this is, someone from the fraud department calling, and we believe there is some fraud attempt happening here at your on your card. We'd like to go ahead and confirm. We're going to go ahead and send you a one-time passcode. And of course, they're talking to their friend scammer on the other end, asking, is that one-time passcode coming? So that they can tell the actual card holder that that one-time passcode is on its way. So anyways, the customer card holder will then go ahead and give the scammer, pretending to be the financial institution, that one-time passcode, which that scammer then sends over to the other scammer who's talking to the bank and gives them that one-time passcode. The bank feels like, okay, we're talking to the card holder, and they go ahead and either increase the limit. Most of the time, what we've been seeing on our end is a travel exemption place, like an increase and a travel exemption, because they know that transaction is going to be coming from a different area. So they go ahead and if we see that area is going to be approved because they put a transaction travel exemption on that card. So then, on it goes back to the second person who's talking to the actual card holder, and the card holder says, oh, well, I don't really see any type of fraud. What is it? And the scammer will then say, well, just go ahead and respond, no fraud. and then, or go ahead and do the transaction, whatever. And then they're out of the picture. All of a sudden, the transactions start occurring on the customer's card, and the scammer, because they've given the information to the bank thinks that everything's okay, and they're not going to have any fraud reported. So it's quite sophisticated
Oh
on a
my
certain
gosh,
level.
it's very sophisticated. How can a customer guard against that?
Well, that's just it. If you get a call, first of all, where's the call coming from? Is it, and granted, they can spoof a bank's phone number. So as we've talked about in the past, so sometimes it could come in as Montecito Bank and Trust. But also what we as a bank are doing, we have what's called step-up authentication. What will happen is our processor will ask additional questions that will confirm that we have the actual cardholder, because there will be certain questions asked to the scammer that's pretending to be the cardholder, these additional questions, so that they know that they're talking to to the actual cardholder. If not, nothing happens. They hang up and report it, make notes that the scam was possibly happened. They go ahead and what we call restrict the card, put that card on hold, and contact the bank, and we go ahead and contact the customer and close down the card. So another way, though, is if you're not expecting anything from the bank, possibly, even though they're calling to say it's fraud, the best thing would be to not respond to the text or a phone call, hang up, call the number on the back of your card. Is always the best one that we suggest, is just go ahead and talk to the bank, because if you're not, and yes, legitimate fraud could be also happening other than this scenario, which I'm talking about, that maybe they're doing some online transactions with your card, whatever. So, but, the fraud department could really be calling you, but, you just should not assume that. I would just go ahead and hang up. Do not answer the text if it's a text that you receive that pretends to be your bank, and just call the number on the back of your card, and
Wow.
they'll get you connected to the right people right away. And generally it's not a wait, when you're with financial institutions on card items like that.
Wow.
So yeah.
This is such an important warning, because I could see so many people, including maybe myself, falling for this, because especially once they've sent the verification code, you think you're fine, but somebody else is intercepting it. So great warning today.
Yeah. And so, at least processors, I would say most banks do have what's called, we call it step-up authentication. So it's just, we take that extra step to go ahead and verify we have the customer on the line. And I do believe that most banks are starting to realize this type of scam, and doing their stepping up to the next level of verifying who they have on the phone.
And can a customer request that step-up verification, or is it just something the bank does automatically?
For us, it's something that the bank does automatically. So it's just something that we pay the additional cost for the customer, and just feel like we're protecting the customer. And if you're requesting a limit of $10,000 and all of a sudden making, these large purchases because they've been approved, and, because the fraudsters have requested it, not the actual cardholder, I mean, quite a bit of money can be lost on both sides. And generally the bank, is taking the loss on those.
Okay.
Or sometimes we can get the money back from the merchant. Or the merchant has to take the loss, or, but there are times where the bank can take the loss. And, of course, the customer is protected under Reg E when it is a debit card. And then of course, credit cards, you have your other levels of protection, zero,
Would you explain that again? Customers are protected with a debit card under, what was the word you said?
It's actually called a Regulation E, which stands for electronic. Anything electronic transaction is protected under Regulation E. And it's a consumer. Unfortunately, businesses don't fall under that. It is a consumer protection. And so we go ahead and take the claim. So as soon as you review your statement, or if you go onto your online banking, and that's what we suggest, check your online banking every 2 days, 3 days, weekly at least. And if you see any fraud, you report it immediately. And at the minimum, at least report the fraud once you receive the statement and you see the fraud. Because the sooner we can act on something, the better, and you're protected, because there are certain guidelines as far as time limits on reporting an error also for the Regulation E. So, but it's it's like 60-day period to report it, but still 60 days. Sometimes people don't review their statement until quarterly or something, and we suggest don't do that.
Right. Oh, this was a really important warning. Thank you so much, Doris. Anything else that you've seen recently that you want to tell us about?
The continuing check fraud. We think checks are going away, but they're not. And, so it's just the continuing check fraud where the checks are stolen or your account number is stolen, and then counterfeit checks are created. And once again, the sooner we know, the better. And
so unfortunately, in case somebody is tuning in for the first time, you warn against using the mailboxes, the blue boxes, and never use your own mailbox with a flag up, because that's just like a flag for the fraudsters. Come and get it. So
here we are.
Here we are. Yeah. Oh, well, thank you. And thanks to everyone at Montecito Bank and Trust for all the great warnings that you provide to the listeners. Appreciate it.
All right. Have a good one.
You too. Bye.
Bye-bye.